So the story begins tonight with White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley, who was in the room during the president's fiery press conference today. Hogan, good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. I mean, you know, I think people look at this and they say, what about us? You know, what about the people of America who would very much like everybody to stop squabbling and maybe get some of this stuff done?
Well, you're right, and that's exactly what the American people should be asking. This is the Russia collusion hoax witch hunt 2.0. They first accused this president of colluding with a foreign power without proof, without evidence, and now Nancy Pelosi is saying that the president is engaged in a cover-up without proof and without evidence. At some point, the media has to ask these Democrats, where's the proof? And if you have all this proof, why are we going through with these investigations? It's not the president who's suffering here. He's doing quite well. It's the American people who deserve their elected officials to roll up their sleeves and get to work, and Democrats refuse to do that. They let our borders become open. They won't touch infrastructure, as we're trying to do this week. It's in bad need of repair. They won't touch the health care system. These Democrats refuse to do anything in the first 100+ days of their control and won't work with the president on a single topic.
I want to ask you about what the president's going to do next, but I do want to ask you a quick question, because there was an interesting moment when he was asking all of you, you know, the recollection of what happened in the room, because she obviously characterized it very differently than the president did. He said he was very calm. At one point, he said, is there a tape of what happened in there? And Kellyanne Conway nodded, yes. So is there a tape of what happened in there?
Yeah, if there's a tape, I've not seen it, but that doesn't mean there isn't one. Listen, we know how the president acts in those closed-door meetings. He's always very calm. He always has the interest of the American people at heart. And instead, Democrats come in there and they want to use the White House and the West Wing to grandstand and try to score cheap political points. What we've got to do is decide. Two I words were at stake this week. It was infrastructure and impeachment. The Democrats chose impeachment, and it's a shame for the American people.
So what does the president do now? I mean, what's his strategy? Because it feels like they're trying to pull this all the way into the 2020 mode, where everything is just on lockdown, nothing's going to happen, and it's going to be all about investigation after investigation.
Well, look, no one's a better brander and no one's a better communicator than Donald Trump. And what he's going to do is take it directly to the American people. We've now seen some, even in the mainstream media, find religion on immigration. We have been crowing about this for 2+ years. The president took it directly to the American people from the Oval Office, from the White House briefing room, from the diplomat reception room, and finally the media is starting to say, hey, there might be a problem on the southern border. The impact across this country has been great. We felt it. The president has been talking about it. He's going to have to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to take it to the people, because they deserve to know what's going on, and Democrats won't come to the table, and we're going to expose that time and time again.
So with regard to immigration, there was an announcement today that basically people who had sponsored immigrants to come into the country are going to be responsible for repaying any of the benefits that they take advantage of. How's that going to work?
Well, absolutely. It's actually already codified into law. It was passed in 1996, signed by Bill Clinton. It just hasn't been enforced. Shockingly, the swamp takes over again. But this president says no more. It's time for those sponsors who said that they would pay for dollar-for-dollar matches to any federal program that paid for immigrants. It's time for them to have some skin in the game here. It's a kickstart, actually, to the merit-based system we've talked about before. We want immigrants in this country. We're not even changing the 1.1 million immigrants that come here every year. We're not changing that number, but we're changing the construct of those who come. We want people to contribute, not to be a drain on the American economy or our social safety net programs that the American people deserve. Right now, immigrants are taking advantage of it, and the sponsors, by law, are supposed to pay for that, and it's time for them to put in their fair share.
So let me ask you this. You know, obviously we've watched what happened over the last 48 hours. That level really can't be, I don't think, can't be sustained, right, indefinitely. Does the president, maybe he cannot work with Nancy Pelosi because they seem like they don't get along at the moment. What about Chuck Schumer? Does he think there's a possibility that maybe he and Chuck Schumer can work together?
Well, it's so interesting. I believe so, but we were working with Chuck Schumer on immigration, for example, and Nancy Pelosi stepped in and pulled her puppet strings and said, you can't work with him. Let's not forget, after our first immigration meeting, we all came out with a kumbaya, let's work together.
The infrastructure meeting.
Correct, like 3 weeks ago. And then we set up a meeting with Secretary Mnuchin at the Treasury and Chairman Neal on House Ways and Means. Guess what? Nancy Pelosi also pulled that meeting as well. We were going to set up funding mechanisms so that we would have something substantive to discuss yesterday. Nancy Pelosi has no intention of working with this president and no intention of doing something for the American people.
All right. I'm going to talk to somebody who might have some more information on that right now. So thank you, Hogan. Good to see you tonight. Hogan Gidley from the White House.
I'm Brett Baer. We begin with some high-level insults in the nation's capital and real questions about the way forward legislatively. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says President Trump is upset not because Democrats are talking impeachment, but because they are not pursuing it, saying he would like to see impeachment politically. The Speaker also reiterated 3 times today that she is praying for President Trump and wishes his people or his family would stage an intervention. The President this afternoon called Pelosi crazy, saying, quote, she's lost it and she's a mess, adding that he is an extremely stable genius. In the middle of all of that, some big things happened today. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off tonight with the news and the high-level sticks and stones from both sides. Good evening, John.
All right, Brett, I will admit it freely. It was a wild day at the White House. Not your typical White House day. President Trump had been going after Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats all day long on Twitter, but at one of his infamous impromptu press conferences late this afternoon, felt that he still had a lot to get off his chest.
She is a mess.
In the Roosevelt Room today, announcing a $16 billion aid package for American farmers hit hard by the trade war with China, President Trump took another swing at House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Crazy Nancy. I tell you what, I've been watching her, and I have been watching her for a long period of time. She's not the same person. She's lost it.
The long-running feud hit a climax yesterday when the Speaker twice accused the President of a cover-up. At her weekly news conference today, Pelosi tripled down.
The things that he is doing, it's very clear. It's in plain sight. It cannot be denied. Ignoring subpoenas, obstruction of justice. Yes, these could be impeachable offenses.
Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer accused the president of throwing a temper tantrum at a White House meeting on infrastructure yesterday that he abruptly walked out of. President Trump insisted they were lying and, in an extraordinary move on live television, asked his aides to back him up.
You were very calm and you laid out the case.
I've seen both, and this is definitely not angry or ranting. Very calm.
Pelosi is under increasing pressure from her caucus to begin impeachment proceedings against the president. Today, she stressed she's not there yet.
I do think that impeachment is a very divisive place to go in our country. And what we can get the facts to the American people through our investigation, it may take us to a place that is unavoidable in terms of impeachment or not. But we're not at that place yet.
Pelosi also accused the president of wanting Democrats to try to impeach him. President Trump didn't exactly say no.
I don't think anybody wants to be impeached.
But he did say that the Democrats' entire focus is on 2020 and that they are out to beat him any way they can.
They don't feel they can win the election, so they're trying to do the 1,000 stabs.
And President Trump is giving Democrats something else to complain about, a new move on legal immigration. In what White House officials say is a down payment on a merit-based system, the president plans to revive a 1996 law that has never really been enforced. The bipartisan Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, signed by President Clinton, requires sponsors of legal immigrants to reimburse the government for any social services used by the immigrant, including welfare and Medicaid. By finally enforcing the provision, the White House hopes to help ensure future immigrants can take care of themselves and not have to rely on government handouts. In a presidential memorandum, President Trump calls on the secretaries of various departments to put in place a mechanism to collect information on the use of social services and then turn that over to the Treasury Department to collect reimbursements. Initially, the plan will only apply to future immigrants, but will include those currently in the country if and when they reapply for welfare, food stamps, or Medicaid. Brett?
John Roberts with a busy day at the White House. John, thank you.
Welcome back. Infrastructure in focus this morning. Congressional leaders and President Trump at a legislative standstill. The president says that he will no longer discuss infrastructure while the Democrats continue to investigate him. The president telling Congress this week an infrastructure plan will have to wait until a trade deal is in place. Joining us right now is U.S. Concrete Chairman and CEO Bill Sandbrook. And Bill, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us. And obviously your company, you want to be involved in an infrastructure. You're planning to be involved in an infrastructure plan. How do you see where we are today?
Well, first of all, our company has about 17% of its revenue dependent on infrastructure. So what's more important to us is a vibrant economy with a GDP above 3%, which we've reached. But nonetheless, the needs are great. American Society of Civil Engineers said we have a $2 trillion funding deficit. Our roads, highways, bridges, and airports are a D+. That's not going to get us into the 21st century. And now we're all caught up in politics. The argument anymore is not about the needs. Both sides agree. They both put $2 trillion on the table, and now it all came down to funding. And then it blew up yesterday. It started the night before with a letter from the president indicating that he needed a prioritization of infrastructure projects from the Democrats first, and then he needed passage of the U.S. Mexico-Canada Trade Pact. And then it plays out. Number one, you could say that's rational. We want to prioritize and see how we're going to spend our money, which really predicates where the money comes from.
Right.
And two, President Trump's a negotiator. So now he's going to put something on the table. So you're going to have we got to have this done before this. So that's not out of the question. And then yesterday you see political theatrics, which is also par for the course.
So before we go further into the theatrics, which I know that there were many yesterday, how would you pay for a $2 trillion infrastructure plan? Well, how does this get paid for, first of all?
Well, part of it is gas tax, an increase in the gas tax, which is already in place since 1993. It's 18.4%. If it would have been indexed for inflation, that would be 31 cents right now. The U.S. population's increased by 40 million people.
Wait, 18 cents or 18%?
18.4 cents per gallon.
Good.
Now, the population's increased by 40 million people since 1993. Vehicle miles driven, miles per gallon is way up. So now you have less money even coming into the fund. And
cars go further on a gallon of gas.
Correct.
So it's not the revenue generator it used to be.
It's part that you become more fuel efficient. Right. So there's less money to fund the infrastructure needs. But infrastructure now is defined more broadly than just roads, bridges, airports, and highways. There's broadband in there. There's waterworks. There's resilient construction. So it's a big, broad definition. An increase in the gas tax is only going to be one part of it, but it's the quickest, fastest. Some people say it's regressive. I would argue that it's the fairest.
Yeah, gas tax.
Well, we're wondering how much of that money is actually going to go to the roads, bridges, and tunnels. Pelosi and Schumer did the 2009 stimulus, $800 billion, 10% or less on infrastructure. She said yesterday, we're talking about a couple $1 billion. Is she saying only a couple of $1 billion out of this $2 trillion package is going to be infrastructure?
I hope that was a misquote or a misstatement, because a couple billion out of a
it's not a misquote.
Well, I hope it was a misstatement or misunderstanding, because the needs are in the trillions of dollars for roads, highways, and bridges.
The president is responding, though, to this constant resist. I mean, Nancy Pelosi will not bring USMCA to the floor. And most people think it will pass if it comes to the floor. So he's responding to that.
Correct.
But in terms of infrastructure, likelihood it gets done this year?
I would say it became less yesterday, but I'm still cautiously optimistic because the needs are not going away.
Bill, good to see you. Thanks so much. Bill Sandbrook joining us there.